This podcast is going to look at food, history, art, and design, and look at how, why, and where they intersect, and the impact that they've had and continue to have on our culture and experiences. Welcome to the Smy Goodness Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Smy. We're going to speak to people involved in food, history, art, and design as well, and sort of see where they think these intersects happen as well. We're going to travel the world throughout time and space, uncover tales, facts, people and objects that have shaped our everyday lives in ways we may not have realized. I remember looking at children encyclopedia books with pictures of China and ancient Rome and Egyptian gods, and there was this battle scene. It was a bit grim. All these soldiers must have had a battle, and there was just decapitated heads and bodies piled up, and I used to stare at that and really wonder about where was this place, where was this time, how is it so different to what we had around us then. Later on in life, I studied historic preservation, archaeology. These were big influences on myself as well. In my historic preservation course, we'd be given a painting, some sort of decorative object, even like a building or an archaeological site, and we'd have to kind of trace it back further and further, learn about its provenance, where it came from, who owned it, what kind of changes it had undergone, and, what sort of story it told, like what you could gather from the evidence that you found and the evidence that you still had before you and the changes that it had had in the meantime. I love pottery, and it was through pottery that I discovered polymer clay, playing around with this polymer clay material, and I just loved it and picked it up and kept on doing it. And after that, I moved to New Orleans. I was, making and exploring pottery, ceramics, and polymer clay further, and selling jewelry at French market. And then I was hand-making beads, and instinctively started to think about, these beads that I was making today, looking through beading magazines and beading books from the library, and just looking at all the different ways beads have been made throughout time, and, using the materials found around them. I intuitively started looking at beads and starting to kind of look and see how beading had been influenced, throughout time, and where some beads had originated and how these beads have sort of traveled throughout time, techniques and materials to where we're used today. When I returned to England, I was selling beads and jewellery at Camden Market, and a friend was mentoring some young people and asked me to come along and have a little session with them, which I did, and just from word of mouth that really turned into me sharing my passion and my work and my creativity with people of all ages, all across London, from all backgrounds. Now that I do a lot of bead making, teaching workshops and courses, I always start any beading class with my bead map, and that charts where and when the earliest beads were found, and you get to see how beads and beading materials and technologies were shared, traded, how they went around the world. And in doing this, materials, methods, and technologies were also exchanged. So that's always stayed with me, and I always try to, I think it's a great focus point to start a course with. Beads have been found next to human remains as far back as 80,000 years ago. This is a number that is getting, older with more and more recent archaeological finds. They're made from stone, shell, ceramic, plastic, being made from computer chips now, wood, bone, and all these uses and meanings, they range, from decoration to trade, money, religion, fashion, all these different meanings that we place onto our beads. And beads are used and have a really wide-ranging scale of meaning throughout time and across the world. From, it's fascinating to me. I think this bead map had a bigger impact on me than I thought. Creativity and food have long been intertwined, and it took creativity to provide food for early peoples, and it required food to, ensure the creativity that would allow us to feed our brains, basically. So I make preserves, I make jams and chutneys, jellies and curds, and for me, when I'm preparing, say, 5 kilos of fruit or vegetable, there's this thing that starts to happen, and for me, it's always very much tied to the form and design of the fruits and vegetables. I just love the way, it's a bit meditative when you start out with, say, 50 quints, but you get into this meditative situation when you're peeling or chopping or slicing, and I just love all the different stages that the ingredients change and unveil, and new form or like new possibilities, from the beginning to the end, all the stages in between where the ingredients change, or the change in chemistry when you are turning some vegetables or fruit fruit into a jam, for example. It goes from at one moment being in one form, and then that heat and perhaps the sugar, the process that you're using, it changes the form of the fruit and vegetables, and it goes on to be something new. I love that, the unveiling of something new, like being created. And I love exploring, for me that's the essence of preserving, like we're altering and manipulating these stages, different cooking, curing, pickling, drying methods. It's capturing the essence through change, I think. And I love to research and explore like new ingredients, and so I was keeping this blog ages ago, and I noticed I started doing a lot of writing about food and looking at beautiful paintings that featured food, and just learning a bit of these little stories about how these fruits and vegetables had sort of traveled the world, and like who had brought them, and how they had been used differently in different places. And I also discovered that there's so much that I had assumed about fruits and vegetables that was not entirely true. For example, I thought that lots of fruits were sort of simultaneously indigenous or native to locations throughout the world, or specific foods were native to places that we associate with them today. For example, pineapples in Hawaii. I just always assumed, Hawaii is quite tropical, pineapples must have originated from them, but, actually they're native to South America, Brazil. It's through mass production that they've been brought to Hawaii and have thrived there. For example, tomatoes, we associate those, with the Mediterranean and, so used in Italian cuisine. They're actually native to Mexico, and that's an example of one of the few fruits and vegetables that have traveled eastward, going, originating in the West and traveling eastward, where the majority of vegetables originate in Southeast Asia mostly and have traveled westward. So again, tomatoes really a little special thing in its impact that it had on Europe, and when it came here, we'll get into that one day for sure. I just love how fruits and vegetables, they've got their own provenance, they've got their own history and stories and mysteries, and I want to get into how these fruits and vegetables have traveled the world. How have they become the ingredients that we know today? Just as with artefacts, in the historic record, and fine vases and fine paintings, it's the same with food. From one little story or item, you can just find out a wealth of information, and that's what we're going to do in this podcast. So, food, art, history, they've all had the handprint of human design sort of stamped on them, and the idea is that food, art, and history imprint themselves upon us and vice versa. We all have memories of specific eating experiences or locations or person that we always share something with. Just the mere mention of particular ingredient, margarita, you can get those little taste buds, the saliva glands in your neck and throat will be activated, but there might be a friend that you share those with, or a particularly brilliant one you shared on holiday or tried on holiday. Then there are foods that come in and out of fashion and within our own lives or past our own lives, and we all have favorite items, and that favorite spoon that you might have that you favor beyond other ones, or particular tools for cooking, or paintings, photographs, stories. It's a type of synesthesia, if you will. It's like sensation produced in one modality and a stimulus is applied to another modality. I've always been fascinated by synesthesia, and it's mentioned all the time in one of the best podcasts in the world, Ronna and Beverly. But it is true. It's just this food is something, it's also something to think about, that for some people food is not an enjoyable experience. Some people it's a real chore, something that they don't have much confidence in, and that's something I've learned a lot in the teaching of food workshops that I do as well. So basically, a few years back, I decided to bundle all my interests together, and I rebranded from Smy Chutney, it's not your chutney, it's Smy Chutney, to Smy Goodness, so that all my preserves, crafts, products that I do, workshops, they all live in one place now, unifying everything together. I have asked a few guests to take their own intersection of food, art, history, and design, because it's all around us every day. And so, in some of the conversations that I've been having with people, it's uncovered things that they've forgotten, things that I haven't known, that they haven't known. So, like it or not, food, art, history, and design, they are all intertwined. And so the podcast won't just be fruits and vegetables, but we'll also be looking at design elements such as lemon juices, or the mocha, still life painting, particular artists. We'll be looking at how different peoples around the world have influenced, this intersection. So really open for suggestions as well. And so please do contact us with any suggestions that you might have. Please do share your own stories and knowledge and questions and suggestions, things you'd like to uncover or would like to talk to me about. So you might be wondering how you're going to see particular artworks or visual items, or perhaps it's a fruit, that you don't have a familiarity with. But if you go to smygoodness.com, there's the podcast section on there, and we're going to try to use that as a place to capture ongoing discussions. But you can also go to Smy Goodness on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr as well. Thank you so much for listening to the introductory episode of Smy Goodness Podcast. Be sure to tune in next week when we'll be discussing quints with Emilio Della Morena, who is currently putting the finishing touches to his collection about to be shown at London Fashion Week Autumn-Winter 2017. If you like the podcast and want to hear more episodes, please do subscribe, or even better, leave a review on iTunes or tell a friend. Okay. Bye.